Can South Carolina break their own record and have multiple first-round draft picks this year? We talk about all that and more. Locked On Gamecock starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. Hope everyone's having a fantastic Monday, if that's even possible, as I always say. We got a great episode for you today. Senior Bowl week has started. There's 9 different Gamecocks that are going to be playing in pre-draft games, I guess. I don't know how to phrase it. But I want to say, first and foremost, thank you to everyone who is making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now, it is Monday, the day after Championship Sunday, which means Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet $5, just $5. And if you win, you will score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's get into the show. So I was thinking about this. We were talking about doing a couple different episodes, and with Senior Bowl week starting this week, I really wanted to get into kind of the pre-draft stuff because it should be, as with any good, exciting year for a lot of teams, one of the caps to that season tends to be what happens every April, and that is at the NFL draft. And this year should be no different. A lot of South Carolina players are being talked about heading into the pre-draft process. We're going to have, now it's the end of January right now, which means you have this month. Then next month they'll do the Underwear Olympics in Indy with the NFL Scouting Combine. And then the draft itself is the very end of April. But it brought me to this hot take. And I don't even think it's that much of a hot take. Just a bold prediction. I think South Carolina is going to either tie or break their own record for most first-round draft picks in a draft this year. And the reason I think that is simple. One, this is a tremendously talented team that we just saw. And the players that have entered the draft, I think, are going to be really, really good players on Sunday. Now, what's surprising here is even with the prediction, because I stand by it firmly, I don't think it's going to be Kyle Kennard. I don't think he's going to be one of them. Most of the things that we have seen about Kyle Kennard, and this is weird because I've seen some places say he's going to be a first-round guy. What I think is going to happen with Kyle Kennard, and I think this is stupid to be very clear, you guys have watched the NFL draft processes as much as I have, and once they get enough time to separate and remove themselves from the season and the tape and everything they put on tape, NFL GMs will talk themselves into anything. It's one of the reasons Anthony Richardson somehow got a top 4 draft pick. It's one of the reasons Jalen Milroe might end up being a top 10 draft pick. But NFL GMs will tell themselves and talk themselves into anything the further they get away from the tape. Kyle Kennard was one of the best, if not the best, defensive players in the country this year. I would argue he was the best. However, his measurables are not great for his position. We'll get into that in a second. I think the coolest part of this whole episode is honestly, and one of the coolest parts of this past season is it's not just a name like Kyle Kennard, who's an All-American, Defensive Player of the Year in the SEC, and a huge, huge name in college football this past year. Even without a name like that, it shows you the depth of this team and the development of this team and what Shane Beamer and company did, where you can talk about getting a multiple players drafted. Now, I think Nick Eamon-Wardy is going to be a first-round draft pick. I just do. I think he is so good. And so, like, whether it's stuff that he will do at the combine, when you start seeing him flip his hips in defensive back drills and everything they'll do on the first or second day of the combine, I think that'll all be really impressive. You also talk about just like his physical stature and how big he is. Add that onto the 2 + 3 years of tape that you're going to have with him. I think that NFL teams are going to fall in love with him when they meet that kid. He's so good in terms of what he does on the field, but off the field and how impressive of a player he is. I don't see any team. I don't see 32 teams letting him slip out of the first round. Now, some of you might be thinking, like, well, what about what happened at the end of the bowl game? I think that one thing you will also see, and this is a testimony and a strength of Shane Beamer, is one of the first things NFL scouts are going to do is immediately call these players coaches, their head coaches, their position coaches, all that kind of stuff. Then they're going to call the coaches from other schools and say, hey, who's the toughest player you get to go up against this year? Talk to me about this guy. And Eamon Warrior is going to pop like constantly in this pre-draft process. I think he's going to be a first-round draft pick. I felt this. I don't know if I thought he was going to be a first-round draft pick, but a guy that is going to be on a lot of big boards, and I think surprise some people. And I'm going to compare it a little bit to a former LSU player, Patrick Queen. It's a guy that I don't think a ton of people were necessarily high on in terms of a first round projection. High on him as a player, maybe a second, third round guy, like a really, really good player that's going to show out at the combine. But I think this kid's going to play himself into a first round draft pick, and it's Demetrius Knight Jr. Like one of the very first episodes we ever did here, I was so fired up about this kid strictly because it was like, look at the size, look what he can do, getting sideline to sideline in a Clayton White defense. You talk about a nickel flex defense where you're talking about 3-3-5, 4-2-5, or whatever. That's not necessarily what a lot of NFL teams will run. A lot of times it'll be more 3-4 type situation, but you can have him like be a sideline to sideline guy. And you want to talk about a guy that's going to go to Indianapolis and at his size run like a deer, it's Demetrius Knight Jr. There's been multiple NFL mock drafts that already have listed him as a number one guy, like a first round draft pick. That's not just me saying this, like and trying to I guess like create my own narrative here. There's multiple outlets that have had him projected in the first round. Here's the other part about it too. He showed up to the Senior Bowl today in Mobile, and this is what he weighed in at. This is what he showed up at: 6'1.25". 246 pounds. And again, he ran 21.5 miles an hour. Maybe he's a little bit slower. But one of the coolest things about athletes like this is when they go to Indianapolis, their entire offseason is dealing with, hey, what's going to put the most money in your pocket? And for a linebacker like him, the tape is going to speak for itself. He'll do great interviews. But I'm guarantee you he has been working his ass off in the offseason with whatever trainer he's had or training company or a lot of these pre-draft training processes that people do, whether it's out in Arizona or down in Florida. I guarantee you he will have something in the low 4.5s or sub 4.5. And he's going to do it 246 pounds. I think between him and TJ Sanders, you are going to have a second or third first round draft pick. And that might sound crazy because 3 does sound crazy. It's never happened in the history of the program. But I think that the more that this pre-draft process has gone on, the more TJ Sanders' name has started to get mentioned. And you're seeing it on multiple, not just like, oh, well, Mel Kiper is really high on him or Daniel Jeremiah is really high on whatever. Like CBS Sports is really high on him. Daniel Jeremiah is really high on him. The NFL Network guys really high on him. Matt Miller. These are all guys like they're already fringe first round, like legitimate second round players. TJ Sanders, who's I believe he is at the Senior Bowl as well. If he has a good week, that is going to be very, very big for him going into the combine and going into the pre-draft process. If he has a good week this week, which we all expect him to do, he should solidify, not even move up on draft boards, but solidify a back into the first round draft pick. And again, I think that the comp I said to Demetrius Knight Jr., I don't believe, like, I'm not comparing him in the style of play, but Patrick Queen, who's coming off that 2019 LSU team that was, they had, I think it was 5 first-round draft picks. They had, all these incredible first-round players and offensive players. Patrick Queen went in the first round of the Ravens. You're like, whoa, where did this come from? I kind of think that's how Demetrius Knight Jr. is going to be. Kyle Kennard is the guy that got all the pub. And we talked about, Debo Williams going into the season, all that kind of stuff. Demetrius Knight Jr. was a guy that came kind of out of nowhere. But every time you turn on the tape, and every time he's going to get to show up in front of scouts, especially when it's involving anything not involving pads, which that sounds bad, but him just being a physical freak and standing next to other people, he's going to be a get off the bus type of winner at the NFL Combine, guaranteed. So I don't think it's that far-fetched. And if South Carolina can put 2 first-rounders this year in the draft, that's ahead of next year. I think it kind of creates this momentum that really could take the program to the next level. And I'll get into more of that in a second because I don't want to get ahead of myself, even though I probably will. Before we move on to the next topic, I want to tell you about our friends at TurboTax. So you guys, listen, one of my least favorite things in the world that we have to do. I don't know whose idea it was that they came up with an idea of, hey, at the end of your fiscal year, every April, right as the springtime is coming and it's starting to get nice outside, we're going to give you an end of the year math project, and you have to add up all the money you made, figure out what you owe us, and if you get it wrong, you could be in big trouble. Super fun from the government. But I'm here to tell you that taxes is no longer anything that involves wondering, worrying, waiting, none of those things anymore. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will also find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything you need with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. There's no waiting, no wondering, no worrying. This is Taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Remember, it's only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See the guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, that is all for the first part of the show. We'll be right back with more Locked On Gamecocks. All right, so I want to go back one more time and talk about the thing of the first round draft picks. Why this would be a huge deal. Getting a first round draft pick in general is a big deal, but having multiple first round draft picks is a huge deal. And I know that you guys know that. I don't think that's a secret by any means. I do want to explain something, though. In the history of this program, I'm reading an article from 2024, from last year. There's only been 16 first-round draft picks. 16. Now, David Legette was one of them in 2024. You had J.C. Horn in 2021. So under Shane Beamer, you've only had one. John Kinlock, God, that kid was good. In 2020. And then obviously you go back to 2014 with Jadeveon Clowney, and Stephon Gilmore in 2012, and Melvin Ingram in 2012 as well. So 2012 is the only year you have had multiple first-round picks. Why this is a big deal is because going into next year and the type of recruits you're starting to bring in, there's certain things that kids care about. And yes, they care about, and recruits, they care about facilities, they care about playing time, they care about getting paid at NIL, all that kind of stuff. They also care about winning. And the end goal, and any good coach and any good recruiter, and that includes Shane Beamer, is able to conceptualize this and also communicate this to players. The NIL money is great. The NIL money is great. Lenore Sellers getting $2.7 million or whatever his deal was. It's over $2 million for this next year. That's great. Do you know where you make the most long-term money? That is being placed in the NFL and getting drafted high and developing yourself in college so you can play for multiple years in the league and then set yourself up for life. It's awesome to get NIL money now. Not everyone's getting millions of dollars in the NIL game. But what's better than that is setting yourself up for success down the road. Now, here's where I get ahead of myself, and I'm admittedly going to probably, I don't know, like get ahead of my skis here, okay? If you can have 2 first-round draft picks this year, think about this. If it's Eamon and Sanders, or Eamon and Demetrius St. Jr., if it's any combination of those 3, if it's all 3, huge, right? Huge. But here's the thing that makes it bigger. Next year, you expect Lenore Sellers to potentially be in the mix to be a first-round draft pick, right? I mean, that's what we all expect. If you then start stacking multiple years in a row where you're putting kids in the league, that's a massive deal. Not only putting them in the league, putting them in the first round, that's a massive deal. Because I guarantee you, the year after that, then you're talking about Dylan Stewart, who's going to be a first-round draft pick. Like point blank, period. He plays a position of need for everyone, and he plays it better than mostly anyone else in the game right now, and he's only a freshman going into his second year. So Now you're talking about potentially putting kids in the league at multiple positions, multiple big positions, because you're talking about quarterback, defensive end, or edge rush, in multiple seasons. That's over 3 years. If you're able to get a first-round draft pick in all 3 years, not only is that huge for your program, but now you start changing the narrative of this entire thing that South Carolina fans and players and coaches have heard about this program forever, which is, they're fun. They jump up every once in a while and they're pretty good. But now you start changing the narrative of, before it was Spencer Rattler who goes in the 5th round at pick like 189 or whatever it was. It was around that, to the Saints. That's the first quarterback you've had drafted since what, like 1990 or 1989? His first quarterback he had drafted in like 34 years. Now you start changing the narrative of, not only are we putting quarterbacks in the league again, but we're putting them in the first round. Not only are we putting kids in the league again, but we're putting them in the first round. We're developing edge rushers. By the way, Dylan Stewart. By the way, you thought Kyle Kennard was good, right? Who's going to end up being a 2nd, 3rd, 4th round draft pick? What do you see Dylan Stewart, who's going to go in the first round? Like, that is how you start building sustainable success. And it's one of the things I constantly bring up on the show, constantly bring up about this program. It's great to win 1 year, and a lot of you are a lot better about this than I am. Like, a lot of you are a lot more calm about not overreacting to stuff, handling stuff with logic and reason, and like I said earlier, not getting ahead of your skis. I'm not great at that. So when I start looking at big picture stuff, and I start looking at, man, the facilities are top 10, you're bringing these incredible recruiting classes, you're top 13 right now. I think you're 13th overall in the transfer portal class. And again, knock on wood, but you haven't missed on any of these kids you brought in. Like, Beamer hasn't missed on any of these guys. You would have to think, with all of the years of NFL experience that Mike Shula has, he's going to at least know how to put players in the NFL, run a great system, and figure out how to get the most out of those players, right? And now you're starting to recruit high-level receivers, good running backs, better across the offensive line. What if Josiah Thompson turns out to be as good as Josiah Thompson's supposed to be? What if he ends up being a first-round draft pick or around there? And again, I know we're ahead of ourselves, but what you have in place right now is a defensive coordinator in Clayton White who is one of, if not the best coordinators in the game. He's a trusted source for NFL scouts, and people will respect his opinion on his defense. Mike Shula, regardless if he's even coached a game as the offensive coordinator, he's only had one, and it was in the bowl game, has not coached a regular season game as the offensive coordinator at South Carolina. I guarantee you, if you ask anyone around the league looking at Mike Shula as a trusted source for what you're looking at and trying to draft, NFL scouts are going to trust him. I would argue more than 80% of the rest of the country, because he's been in the game for that long and he's done it at that level in the NFL. So he knows what he sees. Like, it's so big. The building blocks that they have put into this program, it's so big. And the NFL draft is a massive, massive part of it. And I think that's one part that we just haven't heard a ton of with Shane Beamer. He's a great recruiter, big rah-rah guy, players coach, whatever you want to say. Fun, like loves to win, fiery guy, like will fight for his team. All these things and accolades and things we've attributed to Shane Beamer and how great he's been for this program. One of the things we have not heard or talked about hardly at all since he's been here is players getting in the NFL draft. Not that he hasn't put them in there, but it just hasn't been something they've talked about. And I think part of that is because in this program's history, you haven't had a ton of success at doing it. Like I said, 16 first-round draft picks, not a ton in the grand scheme of things. But if you can start changing that, and now the narrative becomes, oh man, you have down the road, you have 20, and you start looking at that, and the narrative is no longer, well, they don't put players in the league, they don't have high-end first-round picks, they don't develop players, they haven't had a quarterback go in 30 years. Now it becomes, oh, not only are they putting players in the league and putting them getting them paid with first-round draft pick money, but also the narrative becomes 20%, a quarter of the overall players in this program's history that have gone in the first round have done so in a coach that's been there for 5 to 6 years. That's how quickly things can flip. All right, let's not get ahead of our skis anymore. I appreciate you guys, allowing me to do so, but and letting me do it for the rest of the fan base. But I just think there's so much that the potentially good things that can come from the next 3 months of players that are no longer in the program, but are still going to wear that logo on their chest and carry it with them as the next couple months go by in the pre-draft process and then into the NFL draft in late April. Now, before we get into the final part of the show, I do want the last subject we're going to talk about. All 9 of these players that are going to participate in these pre-draft bowl games, exhibitions, all that kind of stuff. You got the Shrine Bowl, East West Shrine Bowl, and you also got the Senior Bowl. We got people boots on the ground down there in Mobile covering the Senior Bowl right now. It's a tremendous event, so we'll have a lot of information on that throughout the week. We'll get into that after this. And what player out of all 9 might be boosting his stock the most? Maybe not a first-round pick, but boosting their stock the most. We'll get to that when we come back. Locked on Gamecocks continues next. All right. We're getting into the final segment of today's show. I appreciate you guys joining us as always. Thank you to our everydayers. Thank you, producer Allie, for doing another great job on the show. Before we get into the final part, I do want to tell a quick little tidbit about our friends at FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. It is in New Orleans. Should be a ton of fun. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. I know, like I said, producer Allie is very excited because her Eagles are going to be in it. Eagles-Chiefs rematch, but there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action all game long. With live betting all game, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Guys, let me be clear when I say this. That's not a joke or an embellishment or said just to wax poetic. You can bet on the coin flip. You can even bet on what color the Gatorade will be in the jug that is poured on the game-winning coach. All of that is available, and all of it is available at FanDuel. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that is icing on the cake. Now, download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you will score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, the official partner of Super Bowl 59. Okay, let's get into the very last parts of the show. And we're still talking about some of these Senior Bowl and exhibition, pre-draft exhibition games. Here's the list of players that are all playing. So there's 2 games that they will be involved in. One is the Senior Bowl. I told you that. That is going to be Kyle Kennard, Demetrius Knight Jr., and TJ Sanders. Now, in the East-West, that game is on Saturday, February 1st at 2:30. The other one is the East-West Shrine Bowl, which will be held Thursday, January 30th. I feel like that game used to be held on Christmas, like way back in the day. It'll be on the NFL Network. It's at 8 p.m., so Thursday night. This game has 6 players from South Carolina, okay? It's going to have O'Donnell Fortune, Tonka Hemingway, Kai Kruger, Raheem Rocket Sanders, and Josh Simon. That's only 5. Okay. And then Bam Martin Scott will be a late addition to the game as well. So, real quick, the player out of all these that I think is going to do the best at having their draft stock soar, I'll give you 2 because I can never just be quiet and give you 1. Tonka Hemingway, who's already turning heads on day 1, but Tonka Hemingway and then Josh Simon. Tonka Hemingway, more than anyone, I think is going to have his draft stock improve. Like Josh Simon, I think is going to be a guy that gets drafted on day 2, maybe day 3, but he'll be a guy that will find a home in the league because of his production in college and how he's built. He's a good receiver. I think he's the best SEC receiver coming out in this class, including the kid from Texas. I don't care what anyone says. You could argue he was the first or second best tight end in the league last year. The kid from Vandy was really, really good, but he's not in the draft for this one. I think Simon's going to be good, but Tonka Hemingway is the one that I think is really going to excel. And here's why. One, that's a kid that has played, it seems like, for forever. He has already done really well on the field, on field. He's done really well so far through drills and practices at the East-West Shrine Bowl so far. But here's the main thing. as someone that's got to talk to this kid at Media Days a couple years ago, there are few people that are as captivating to talk to, that light up a room, and are as fun, polite, well mannered, and just exude like that kid gets it. Like that kid gets it. As Tonka Hemingway, he is going to be such a great ambassador for this school and this university and this football program. But that kid, I think that he's so underrated because you had so much depth at that position this year, and it's also a position where you don't get a ton of stats, and you don't have a ton of of highlights or anything like that. Like what he put together on film is really really impressive. But when you're also going up on the same defensive line as Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard, those are the guys with the numbers they put up, especially that are going to get the most, the most publicity and the most shine and all that kind of stuff. Hemingway is going to move up draft boards so quick, and it's not just because of what he's going to do on the field. What he does in the interview room, I think, will be just as important, and he will be fantastic every step of the way in that. So that's all for my pre-draft hot takes today. I'm sure there'll be plenty of more as we get closer to the draft. Like I said, the Senior Bowl is this week. It's going to be on Saturday. We will have people that are reporting back from the Senior Bowl every day. So we'll have news and notes from that each and every day. Right now, South Carolina women are playing in Knoxville. I think at the time of recording this, they were down 1 with like halfway through the second quarter. So we'll see where we're at there. We'll do a recap of that game tomorrow and much, much more all week long. So make sure you are tuning in for the Locked On Gamecocks, your first listen every day. For your second listen, maybe drop in one of the SEC squad shows or Locked On SEC with our buddy Chris Gordy as well. Until next time, go Cox.